This week, the portion is the portion of Pekudei, where Moshe gives an accountability for all the materials that were brought and donated for the building of the Mishkan, where the gold went, where the silver went, where the copper went, and all the various components that were necessary for the Mishkan. And the Torah tells us, Eile Pekudei HaMishkan. Mishkan Ha'edus. This is the countings of the Mishkan, meaning showing exactly how everything was utilized for this, for the Mishkan, Mishkan Ha'edus, the Mishkan of Testament. Just to begin, very interesting. There's a verse in Proverbs where King Solomon says, Ish nemonos rab brochos. A person who's a nemon, a person who's truthful and faithful, that person, his blessing, he will generate great blessings. And where do we find, who is the Ish nemon? The person who's faithful and reliable and honest? Zeh Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was that faithful, honest, true person. Why? Because we find he was chosen by God to oversee the building of the Mishkan, and he was faithful to the degree where he showed that every nuance, every bit of gold, silver, and copper that was given, he showed exactly how it was utilized. A man who has control of so much wealth, you'd say a person would be suspect that maybe he would somehow siphon some off, he would embezzle some. But Moshe Rabbeinu, even as great as Moshe was, he showed clearly exactly where every bit of wealth, how exactly it was integrated and part of the Mishkan, which all the materials were prescribed by God himself. So Moshe Rabbeinu is called Ish Nemon. He's a faithful, honest person. So King Solomon says, that person is Rav Brachos. He will generate great blessing. A person who identifies with this characteristic, with this attribute, whatever he's involved with, it generates great blessing. And the Midrash says, who is Ish Nemanos? Who is this person of the special distinction? Zeh Moshe Rabbeinu. It's Moshe Rabbeinu. And therefore, everything Moshe Rabbeinu was involved with generated great blessing. So I want to ask a question. Why is this characteristic, this attribute of honesty, integrity, and being faithful to the nth degree, why does that person, why is he the source to generate blessing? Why is that? So what I explained, the way I understand it is, now what is the basis for a person to be honest and reliable and faithful? The bedrock of that, the basis for that, is that a person is truthful. A person who's truthful and honest, he's faithful. Honesty is synonymous with truth. And therefore that person, his standard of integrity is impeccable because it's rooted in truth. I always mention the name of the Maharal of Prague. If a person minimizes truth as much as an iota, in Hebrew, the word truth is emes. Emes is truth. Let's say somebody presents something which is 99.999, keep going, truthful. What is it? Is that truth? So in the Hebrew language, in the Hebrew alphabet, the aleph represents something which is infinitesimal. The aleph. the Hebrew spelling of emes is Aleph Mem Tov. If you take off the Aleph of Mem Tov, what's left? It spells mess, corpse. It's worthless. If you take off as much as an iota and you detract anything from truth, and it's not unadulterated truth, it's mess. It's not it. A person is nemon. A person is truthful and honest. That's ish nemonos. You're a faithful, honest person. It's only because he has this attribute of truth, which is the impetus for everything in his life. And that's the basis. That's the foundation of everything. He will not do anything which is not honest due to his standard of truth. Therefore, because he has that standard of truth, he generates blessing. But why? Now let's understand. Moshe Rabbeinu says to the Jewish people, Atem adveikim b'Hashem Elokechem chaim kulchem hayom. You cleave to God. The Jewish people, chayim kulchem hayom. You live continuously. You thrive when you attach yourself to God. Why? So Maharal of Prague explains, what is the source of all life? What's the source of anybody who thrives? It's God himself. God is the source of life. God is the source of all blessing. So to the degree that you attach yourself and you cleave to that, that will determine the level of life you have. Because God is the source of all life and all blessing. Therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu says to the Jewish people, Atem adveikim b'Hashem Elokechem. When you cleave to your God, chaim kulchem hayom, you will live continuously at the most advanced level. Because the degree that you're cleaving, and he is the source of everything. The Talmud tells us in one location that the signet of God is truth. That is God's signet. So if one assumes God's signet, what are you doing? You're emulating God. That means you're attaching yourself. By emulating yourself, you're creating that commonality to God himself. As I always say, what is the basis for compatibility? The basis of compatibility is commonality. So the degree that you assume his attributes, his characteristics, that is the degree that you cleave to him. Therefore, ish nemonos, if a person is that truthful, reliable, faithful person, everything that emanates from that person is blessing. Because he himself being attached to that degree, assuming God's attribute of truth, which is God's attribute, automatically, whatever that person does, he generates blessing. That's ishne monos, rav brachos. There's abundant blessing that comes from that person. So let's understand, when a person gets married, a Jewish man and woman, we give a blessing. The blessing we give is an interesting blessing. We say he should build bayis ne'emon b'Yisrael. It should be a truthful, faithful home in the Jewish people. What's truthful and faithful? Meaning upholding the Torah as God prescribed it. That means you are faithful to God. You're truthful to God by observing the Torah, its commandments. Why is that such a important blessing? Of course, they should be observant. Because since being nemon, being faithful and reliable, and being authentic, in this context, you're assuming the attribute of truth of God because that is God's characteristic. Because why are you faithful to God? For the right reason, not with an ulterior motive, but because it's God's will. That be faithful, you're truthful to God. Once you're that, blessing is generated from that home. So automatically, the greatest blessing you give to a new couple when they embark on a new life together is they should be nemon. They should have a level of clarity and appreciate what God offered them. They should be faithful and dedicated to the will of God. And that is the greatest blessing we give to a new couple embarking on a new life. And that was Moshe. Why was Moshe Rav Brochos? He emanated, he was able to bring about such level of blessing, is because he was Ish Emunos. Okay? We know that every word of the Torah is only stated because it's necessary. If it's not necessary, there's no such thing as anything that's superfluous in the Torah. But yet, we find something over here seemingly repeated, and the question is, why does the Torah repeat it? The Mishkan was the sanctuary. It says, this is the accounting of the Mishkan. Then it says, the Mishkan of Edus, the Mishkan of Testament. So it could have said, this is the counting of the Mishkan of Edus, the Mishkan, which was a testament, which we'll discuss in a moment. What was it a testament for? Why repeat it? This is the counting of the Mishkan of Testament. The second Mishkan is so seemingly superfluous. Now in Hebrew, how does one say collateral? Collateral is called a mashkon. Mashkon is collateral. The reason why the word Mishkan is mentioned twice, it's alluding to the destruction of the first and second temple. That God, instead of destroying us, he took the first temple as collateral, and he took the second temple as collateral, rather than destroying us. You're not able to pay the debt, take collateral in the place of the debt. And once you pay the debt, then the collateral is returned. Once we achieve a level of perfection, where the world reaches its level of perfection, the third temple will be built to be there forever, eternally. But here with the Mishkan, the tabernacle in the desert, which is called the Mishkan, which wasn't ultimately meant to be permanent, it was only the forerunner to the temple built in Yerushalayim on the Temple Mount. This, we're alluding here already to the two levels of collateral that are going to be taken in the future, the first and second temple. Therefore, the Torah saying, "Eila pkudei Mishkan." These are the countings of the Mishkan, Mishkan or Edus, the Mishkan of the Testament. Okay, so I asked the question, which I think is a good question. The Mishkan was one of a kind in terms of its spirituality. Every component of the Mishkan was never taken by the enemy. The Mishkan was hidden away because since the Mishkan was overseen and infused with holiness by Moshe Rabbeinu, anything that Moshe Rabbeinu was involved in is part of eternity. It cannot be captured. Therefore, every aspect of the Mishkan was actually hidden away. So if the Mishkan is such a holy edifice, and we find in the Midrash that the Mishkan is referred to, Mishkan Shel Moshe is the equivalent of gold. It's the most precious to God. And yet, within the context of this Mishkan, we allude to the destruction of the first and second temple. Why? We want to talk about our failings, seemingly not at this moment. This is not the moment to talk about it. Something of which happened later. But yet, when we speak about the Mishkan, this is even before it was erected, we already speak about the destruction of the first and second temple. It's like, God forbid, a person gets married, and the bride and groom, that's the happiest day of their life, and you say to the husband, you realize your wife is not going to live forever. Someday, if she predeceases you, you're going to bury her. And then you say to the wife, your husband's not going to live together. And if he should predecease you, you're going to bury him. Is that what you talk about right under the chuppah? Here, we're reinstated by God. The divine presence entering in our midst. We're already talking about the destruction of the first and second temple. It's not appropriate. Is this the moment you talk about it? But the Torah is already alluding at this moment that there can be two collaterals that can be taken from us, the first and second temple. How do we understand this? Now, why did we need a Mishkan? God says, make for me a Mishkan, this edifice, and I will dwell in your midst. That means God's presence dwells in the Mishkan. So how's that in our midst? This is an arm's length relationship. Meaning the medium for me to dwell in your midst, it has to be through the Mishkan. It's not directly. So the Gemara tells us, Talmud tells us, if not for the sin of the golden calf, we as a Jewish people, we were qualified that the divine presence should dwell directly in our midst. We would have been the Mishkan. Of course, you'd have an altar, you'd have all the components, but a separate edifice, that it's a medium for our relation with God, that's indirect. That's arm's length relationship. It would have been direct. But because we failed with the golden calf and we became tainted with idolatry, we're no longer qualified to have the divine presence dwell directly in our midst. So we need the medium of the Mishkan, that's the medium through which we have relation with God. That's the understanding. Now, after the sin of the golden calf, Moshe supplicated God for forgiveness, and we forgive him. V'solachti, I forgive them. But as much as we were forgiven, we did not revert back to the first level that we reached pre-sin. The first tablets were broken. Moshe comes down with a second set of tablets. We have the ark. What's contained within the Aron? The second set of tablets with the broken shards of stone, which are inside that box, known as the Aron, the ark, and the Torah. The second, the reinstatement, we were not at the original level. We did not revert back to the first level. Therefore, the divine presence wasn't directly in our midst. But God forgave us. At Sinai, when we said Nasiv and Nishma, when we said we accept unequivocally the Torah, we heard the 10 Commandments. What level of spirituality did we assume at that moment? So the Talmud says explicitly, based on verses and prophets, we reverted back to the level of Adam pre-sin of the tree of knowledge. And we would have been eternal people. At that moment, we would have lived forever. But because we failed with the golden calf, we reverted back to post-sin due to the idolatry. Okay? The moment you're tainted with idolatry and we reverted back to post-sin, what does post-sin mean? Post-sin means we're vulnerable to sin now. We're inclined to sin. God says to Moshe, although I forgive them, but whenever tragedy will come upon the Jewish people to be punished for their errant behavior, their transgressions, the punishment for the sin of the golden calf will be included within that punishment. It's not purely for the new transgression. Part of the punishment will be punishment for the sin of the golden calf. The question is why? You should be punished. We were forgiven the golden calf. The punishment is due to the new transgression. But no, God says to Moshe, whenever they will be punished, and tragedy will come upon them, part of the tragedy will also include as a part of an atonement for the golden calf. The question is why? Now, the Jews, if they wouldn't have sinned with the golden calf, they reverted back to pre-sin. They would have been eternal. There would have been no, from that moment going forward, the whole concept of Chil Hashem, God's name being desecrated, wouldn't have existed. So why, from that moment going forward, why is there such a thing as transgression? Why is there such a thing as desecration of God's name? Due to the sin of the golden calf. So as a result of that, what is the root of all sin? The root of all sin is the golden calf. Therefore, when you will be punished for whatever that transgression may be, and tragedy, God forbid, will befall the Jewish people, within that tragedy, there will be part of the tragedy is to atone for the golden calf, because it's only due to the golden calf that you're where you are, because you reverted back to post-sin only because of the golden calf. That's the understanding. Now, it's called the Testament of It's the Mishkan of Testament. So Rashi cites the Midrash. What is it a testament to? That God forgave the Jews for the sin of the golden calf. God was willing to look away for the sin of the golden calf. What does that mean? Why are we arm's length from God? Because we failed with the golden calf. If that's the case, the temple in the future, everything's temporary. Because since we're inclined to sin, and the basis for sin is the golden calf, and that's why we need this arm's length relationship, that means we still possess that microscopic cell, which ultimately will topple the apple cart, will actually take us down. That slippery slope, which ultimately will cause the destruction of first and second temple. Therefore, we speak about the building of the Mishkan. What's inherent in Mishkan? In God's presence in our midst. It's not going to last. And he gave us two collaterals, which are going to be provided to us, for us, that because when we fail, rather than destroying us for our errant behavior due to the golden calf, the collateral will be taken in place of the Jewish people, which is the first and second temple. Therefore, within the Mishkan, it's immediately alluded the future destructions of the first and second temple, because the Mishkan only exists because of the failing of the golden calf. And all sin emanates due to that reverting back to the post-sin state for that reason. We find, I'm going to read this in a week from now, on Shabbos, it's called Parsha Zohar. The portion, it's a positive commandment to remember what Amalek had done to us when we left Egypt. And God says, because they did to us when we left Egypt, their name should be obliterated from under the heaven. And my throne is not complete until they're wiped off the face of the earth. What did they do? And there's something we're going to read on that Shabbos. It's called Parsha Zohar. And it's a positive commandment to listen to this. What they did was, when we left Egypt, they attacked us. They attacked us. This nomad band of people attacked us. So what was so terrible? So they attacked us. We had many enemies that attacked us. So the simple understanding is that when did they attack us? After the splitting of the sea, and the sea closed on the Egyptian armies, and they were destroyed. And we sang the song of the sea. And within that Oz Yosher, we speak about how all the nations of the world trembled because they had seen the might of God, what he did on behalf of the Jewish people. The Jews themselves were on a pedestal. They were unapproachable. There was such awe and reverence for the Jewish people, understanding that we're something unique and we have a special relationship with God. Because God never did for any nation in the history of existence what he did on behalf of the Jews. So what happens? This nomad band, they're not fazed, they're not impressed. They attack us. What was the consequence of that attack? So Rashi cites the Midrash. You have a scalding bath. Anybody goes in there gets burnt due to the degree of heat. And you have a fool. What does he do? He jumps into the bath and he gets scolded. But after he gets scolded and burnt, although reality is whoever goes there is going to get burnt, but the perception is the bath is approachable. Because the fool, he jumped in the bath. So what did Amalek do when they attacked us? The simple ones, they burst the bubble. The Jews had an aura. The Jews were seen as God's people, because God did on behalf of us what he never did for anyone else. They said, don't be so impressed. We, a lowly nomad tribe, we will attack them. And if we're not afraid and concerned, you people, nobody has to be concerned. So they took the Jews to a peer level, and being a peer level, the Jews no longer are that representation of God's presence, because they're no different than anybody else. So as a result of one approach would be, Because if we ourselves would have been on that pedestal, the world would have come to the recognition that there's only one God. And ultimately, the world would achieve this level of perfection. But because we were attacked and the aura was removed from us, and we no longer seen in that special level, having that spiritual persona, therefore, what happened? The world can continue to coast. And therefore, the world never achieved its level of perfection. So due to who? Did the world never reach its level of perfection? Due to the Amalekites attacking the Jew. Therefore, God says, why did the world never achieve its level of perfection? Because of the Amalekites. Therefore, it's unforgivable. I will obliterate them from under the heavens, because my throne is not going to be complete until they're obliterated. That's one understanding. The other understanding is this. There's a question which is asked by the Ibn Ezra, who was a contemporary of Rambam, who lived in Egypt, same time as Rambam Maimonides lived in Egypt. One of the 10 commandments is lo sachmod. You should not have designs on your fellow's wife, on his property, his home, on his animals. You shouldn't have your eyes there. I mean, don't be envious. Don't desire to have what someone else has, that you would like to have it. So the obvious question is, anything in the Torah, any negative commandment we have control over, we're able to suppress things. We're able to refrain through suppression. We're able to do things and force ourselves. Although we're not naturally motivated, we can push ourselves to do things. But envy and believing what the other person has should be, you should have, how do you control those feelings? If you have it, you have it. So how could there be a negative commandment not to have designs and interest in what someone else has that you wouldn't want to have it? That's the question which is asked. So the Ibn Ezra says a profound answer. He gives an example. You have this princess, and the only one who the princess is eligible for is only the prince. Of course, she's royalty. Royalty marries royalty. There's not even consideration in the commoner's mind that the princess will be available to him. Not to be a consideration. And the princess is beautiful. She's intelligent. She's educated. She's poised. She has every quality. Is the commoner jealous of the prince that he has a special woman available to him and the commoner doesn't have that special woman available to him? The answer is no. Why? Because the person understands it's something which has no relevance to him because he's not a prince. So if a person understands something which is meant for someone else and not for you, you have no envy. You're only envious of something that you believe that you should have. So something that you believe you should have, it's in your realm of taking possession. You believe, why does the other person have it? I should have it. But the prince who's on another level, it's not a consideration. And he gives an example. Is a human being jealous of the bird that the bird could fly? The answer is, well, you're not a bird. A bird flies, a human being doesn't fly. So the same thing, if a person would understand that everything that every one of us has, we have it because it's an endowment to serve the person, to facilitate value in your life. And each person has his unique value. And the amenities are provided to achieve that objective. Therefore, what someone else has is not meant to be yours. And if you would not know that what the other person has is not available to you, it's not within your realm of existence, the person would be jealous and without having designs on it. That's the famous word of the Ibn Ezra. So let's understand. After the splitting of the sea and the Egyptian armies were destroyed, how were the Jews seen? They're on a level unto themselves. God's people, God's kingly, princely people. God never did to any nation what he did on behalf of the Jews. It's a unique relationship. The world trembled. The world melted just by thinking of the Jew, because God displayed his might on their behalf. Okay? So we're not on a peer level. Not on a peer level. What happens? Amalek which they're deprecators, they don't have the capacity to appreciate spirituality, they go and attack us. What was the value of that attack? There's nothing to be afraid of. They're no different than we are. And we're going to put a dent in this. So when they attacked us, you know what they did? Being seen on that separate realm of value, we reduced to a peer level with all of the other nations. The Medrash tells us that the Jews worshiped the golden calf because of Ayin Hara, because the nations of the world gave us an evil eye. Why? Because the giving of Torah at Sinai was a public event. And all the nations see God's giving the Torah to the Jewish people. There was a degree of envy. And because of that envy, that led to the golden calf. Our defenses were weakened, and therefore we succumbed to the golden calf due to the envy, the evil eye. Now the question is, why was it an evil eye? Because the nation felt we should be treated that way. What do you mean? But the Jews are princes. You're commoners. The answer is because after Amalek attacked us, in perception, they reduced us to a commoner level. Once they're commoners, well, therefore, what you have, I should have. And once that enters into the makeup of perception, we talk about an evil eye. So who's the cause of the Chet Egel, the sin of the golden calf? The Amalekites. Because it's only because they reduced us to a peer level, that's the reason why there was that envy. Because of that envy, there was a sin of the golden calf. If we had said, if not for the golden calf, the Jews reverted back to pre-sin. So why did we revert back to post-sin? Because of the golden calf. So what is the cause of every transgression from that moment going forward? Every desecration of God's name. You know what the cause of that is? That Amalek attacked us. Because the Amalekites attacked us, they reduced us to peer level. Once we're peers, we speak about evil eye. There's envy. Once there's envy, there was the golden calf. So who's the cause of all Chil Hashem till the end of time and all sin? The Amalekites. Because there was only a basis for that evil eye, only because what? They compromised us when they attacked us. Therefore, God says, my throne is not complete. It would have been complete if the Jewish people wouldn't have worshipped the golden calf, but that's only if they would have been seen in the context of being princes. They're not on peer level with all the other nations. So who brought them to the peer level? Amalekites. So my throne would have been complete if we would have been attacked. But because you attacked them and you brought them to the peer level, therefore they reverted back to post-sin. Therefore, you have to be obliterated from under the heavens, and only then is my throne secure for that reason. That's the understanding. Now, it's referred to as Mishkan Ha'edus. We've mentioned the word collateral twice. The two collaterals that are meant to be taken in the future, the first and second temple. But it's a Mishkan Ha'edus. It's a testament that God forgave us for the golden calf because he re-entered our midst. We reinstated. Now, we find one of the holidays we have is Hanukkah. What did Hanukkah take place? At what period in history did this take place? It was at the time of the Greek conquest. The Greeks came into Israel with their armies and took over, and they desecrated the temple. They sacrificed for idolatry. They brought non-kosher species as sacrifices, and they actually desecrated the temple. Those were the Greeks. And they issued all kinds of decrees. You're not permitted to circumcise yourselves. You're not permitted to study Torah. You're not permitted to observe the Shabbos. These were all Greek decrees. But they said every Jewish home must have a plaque on it. It's like the Nazis, Yamach Shemo, or in the Middle Ages, Jews had to wear certain types of insignias identifying them as Jews. What did every Jewish home have to have in the Greek period? Every Jewish home had to have a plaque on the door or on the wall. What was on that plaque? The horn of an ox or a cow, and you had to engrave on that or write on that, Ein lanu chel v'elkei Yisrael. We have no share in the God of Israel. No share whatsoever. But what is this all about? But that was part of one of the decrees. The Jews have to write, we have no share in the God of Israel. The Greeks themselves said, why aren't you agreeable? The Greeks admired the Jews because of their intellect and their levels of accomplishment. So why was there this confrontation? Because the Jews weren't agreeable to accept idolatry. Because we're committed to God. We have a relation with God. Sinai was a husband-wife relationship, like a chazan and kala. So the Greek says, say to the Jew, who are you fooling? You have a couple happily married. Over time, it happens. A marriage gets stale, and what happens? The wife, God forbid, commits adultery. But committing adultery years later, is that an indication originally the relation wasn't an authentic, genuine, quality relationship? It's not an indication of anything. Things happen later. What about if the wife commits adultery under the chuppah? What does that say? That says the whole relationship was a facade. It was never real. It was never genuine. Because how do you commit adultery under the chuppah? You're just married and you're already committing adultery. If there was ever, you had that level of bond, it's impossible. The answer is the whole thing wasn't reality. It was all a delusion. So the Greeks said to the Jews, the reason why you don't want to become idolaters, accept our pagan beliefs, because you're committed to God from Sinai. But don't you realize Sinai itself wasn't real? Because since you violated, you committed idolatry with the golden calf, what does that say? That says initially the relation was never a relationship. So who are you deluding? Therefore, that was the value of writing on the plaque, the horn of the cow or the ox, which is the species, we have no share in the God of Israel. Stop deluding yourselves. Embrace our idolatry. Embrace our paganism. That's what it was about. But factually speaking, why is it a good point? Seemingly it's a good point. This interpretation, what I just said, is named in the Maral of Prague. So the answer is, the Midrash asked the question. The nations of the world say, who are you fooling? Now, if you read the narrative of the golden calf, it says over there that when they believe Moshe died, it says they presented the golden calf and they said, this is your God, Israel. But if the Jews themselves initiated the golden calf, what do you mean this is your God? This is our God. So it's clear from the narrative that the Jews themselves did not initiate the golden calf. It was initiated by the rabble who came out of Egypt with the Jews. They initiated it, and we succumbed to that initiation. So in terms of ourselves, the relationship was genuine, but we succumbed. There was a claim against us, but not to be annihilated. Therefore, the original relationship was genuine. What does the Mishkan say? Mishkan or Edus, it's a testament that God forgave us. Why is it a testament God forgave us? Because God reinstated us. He gave us a second set of tablets, and the divine presence re-entered into our midst. Although today it's arm's length, because now we need a medium, and it no longer dwells directly in our midst, but facts that God dwells in our midst. So that's a testament to the world that God forgave us for what we had done, and it's not an indication the relationship was never genuine. That's the understanding. So the Mishkan itself, what does it say? It's the two statements here. We still have a relation with God, and it's not a delusion. We're not delusionary. In addition, because it's post-sin, as I said, we revert back to post-sin. Therefore, the Mishkan already is alluding that this situation is only temporary. And ultimately, there are going to be two collaterals that are going to be taken due to the failing of the Jews. The first and second temple, the first taken because they violated the three cardinal sins, and the second temple was destroyed because of unwarranted hate. That's the reason. Now, we find that what was the holiest vessel of the Mishkan? The Aron, the ark. The ark was made of three boxes. There was an outer gold box. There was a center box made of acacia wood. And the most center box was made of gold. In this box, you had the second set of tablets, and you had the Shivrei Luchos. You had the broken stone of the first set of tablets that Moshe broke, which had no writing on them. That was inside the Aron. What's the value of putting the broken stone in the Aron? God says, what do you put in that Aron, which is the Mishkan of Testament? The second set of tablets, the broken tablets. You know, what's the value of having broken tablets? The answer is because originally you had the words that were God's inscription on those tablets, which were inscribed by God. And when Moshe broke the tablets, letters of fire ascended upward to heaven. But that's what it represents. So what is that? That represents a disenfranchisement of the Jewish people. What does second tablets represent? A reinstatement of the Jewish people. But why? What do you need it? What do we have to talk about that we're disenfranchised? Talk about we're God's people. We have the second set of tablets. Do you know why? Because we need the first set of tablets that at least there's a remnant of that first relationship. Because factually it was delusional and it wasn't real. Why does God want the broken tablets should be put in that box? It clearly says that we were not fully culpable. Because we were fully culpable, there's no relationship. So identically, for the same reason, it's to be a testament to the world that the Jews are not fully culpable. And that's why I want the first tablets, the remnant of the first tablets should be put in that box together with the second tablets, which is the reinstatement. Because the only reason why we were reinstated is only because God could look away and forgive us, because the first failing is not only attributed to us, it was due to outside influences of the rabble. So that's why the broken tablets are put within that box. They're called Shivrei Luchos, the broken tablets. But what's the takeaway? There's a takeaway. And the Talmud says, let's say you have a person who's a great Torah sage. And as he gets older, due to Alzheimer's, a hardening of the arteries, he forgets. And he's no longer the repository of that information. Does one have an obligation to accord him the honor and the reverence as if he still possesses that knowledge? So the Talmud says, it's explicit. The Torah says the broken tablets, which initially contained God's words on them, should be put together with the second set of tablets. But it's only broken pieces of rock. The answer is, but because initially it did have that inscription on it, therefore it's no less holy. Therefore you keep it with the new tablets. So for the takeaway is that a Talmid Chacham who forgot his learning due to something beyond his control, it's not due to his own distraction, but rather it was just age or some other reason, not attributed to himself, you treat him as a full-fledged scholar. As you treat the broken tablets as what? As if the writing is still on them for that reason. This week's reading, the Midrash tells us, what was the original intent of God when he created this world? Where should his presence be? In heaven or on the terrestrial level with man? So it's explicit in the Midrash. Originally, his intention was it should be on the terrestrial level, not in the celestial level, to be associated with man. Because the value of creation was the human being being in a position to make choices. And hopefully, if he makes sufficient right choices, he will reflect God's image. He will expand God's image because man was created in the image of God. That's what it was meant to be. What happened? The first day of creation, Adam eats of the tree of knowledge. It's over. He did something which putrefied himself, putrefied existence. It's not going to happen. Fast forward to Sinai, there's a new boy on the block. The descendants of Avram, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the patriarchs. They go and they embrace God's script, the Torah. God says, now you assume the identical status as Adam. Before the sin. Fine. But that's what happened. We failed with the golden calf, we revert back to post-sin. But although we're reverting back to post-sin, but knowledge-wise, Torah-wise, what do we possess? We possess the same Torah. So therefore, when the Mishkan was built, the joy that God experienced, because this is the first time since the sin of Adam that the Shekhinah, divine's presence, is entering on the terrestrial level, to be on the terrestrial level. Because as he said, make for me a sanctuary that it should dwell in their midst. In terms of the sanctuary, the divine presence was there. In terms of our connection to that, we are connected, but it only comes through that medium. I'm going to stop here. Any questions?